The fundamental problem for leadership is your AI strategy shouldn't be about AI. The whole thing about AI should really be about people.
Brian, what's your take on this hot take that AI is going to replace jobs? What's your spin on this?
Dave and I have talked deeply about this for years, and it was a big driver for the book. I think we confuse jobs with tasks. And I think once we shift that mindset, what we can now do is...
Welcome to the podcast, where we introduce you to incredible humans who share their journeys with the mission to inspire you to harness your own inner tenacity to drive your life and career forward. And now, your host, Adam Posner.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. Today's episode is one of those conversations that sits right at the intersection of technology, leadership, and what comes next. I'm joined by two leaders who spent their careers helping organizations navigate massive waves of disruption before they became mainstream. First, Brian Solis. Brian is a world-renowned digital anthropologist, I love it, futurist, best-selling author, keynote speaker, and currently head of global innovation at ServiceNow. For more than 2 decades, he's been one of the leading voices helping businesses understand how emerging tech reshape human behavior, customer expectations, and the future of work. And joining him is Dave Wright, not David Wright of my New York Mets, but Dave Wright, entrepreneur, investor, tech executive, and longtime business builder whose work is focused on helping orgs scale through periods of transformational change. We have a lot to unpack. We're going to talk about the book. We're going to talk shop. Brian and Dave, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much, Adam.
Love it, love it. And Dave, I'm going to get this out of the way once. I'm a Mets fan. I'm wearing my New York Mets hat, so I got the David Wright reference out of the way. I don't know how many times you get that. Hopefully not. But
so the weird thing is, I'm English, so
yes.
I didn't know David Wright was a thing until I arrived in America 15 years ago. So it's all been an experience for me. But I have got a Dave Wright baseball card.
Well, that's awesome. Well, I'm excited to talk about your new book, How Visionary Leaders Transform Today's Business into AI-Forward Companies. And what I love about it, that you're really challenging leaders on to stop thinking about AI as another tool to bolt on to an existing process, but rethink how orgs can become smarter when they embed it at its core. And I talk a lot about this a ton in my recruiting work. I'm deeply aligned with a lot of TA and HR tech companies that are evolving HR. So we're going to get into it. But before we get back into that, as I mentioned in the upfront while we were chatting, I love to unpack careers and I love to unpack the lessons learned, and both of you are veterans in corporate America. So I'll start with Brian. And what I love to ask, thinking back into the early, maybe mid stage of your career, how important it is to realize what you don't enjoy doing and what you don't like, and environments in the workplace that you're not productive. And what were those kind of signals for you where you're like, I don't enjoy doing this, I want to focus on this, something else?
It's been a recurring theme of my entire career, which was not because I got tired of anything or bored. It's because there's always the next thing. It's a very Silicon Valley thing to do. You know, you're constantly seeing what's next, and you're moving towards that if you believe that is something you need to be part of. And so that has been consistent throughout my whole life. And so the latest, as we'll talk about, being artificial intelligence, but it's just been fast. And when I look back, like through questions like this, it reminds me, like, all of the things you forget about, like how cool every stage of that evolution has been. I don't think I've actually taken enough time to go back and say, that's pretty cool.
It certainly is. And you think about it too, even when you look at something, a microcosm like social media, like the evolution of social media and how it's gone, or e-commerce, and that whole evolution. Dave, what about yourself? Was there a moment in your career where you were doing something that you didn't enjoy that really pointed you in the right direction? Where you could put your finger on it?
I guess so. I mean, Brian's career is like way more interesting than me. He's done a lot of different things in different areas, whereas I have been exactly what you said. I've been Silicon Valley, corporate America, 35 years working for California and Israeli software companies. For me, it was someone else telling me what I was good at. So I'd spent a lot of time on the kind of pre-sales solution consulting area, like demonstrating products, talking about technology. And someone said to me once, he said, your real skill is to be able to take a very complex technical solution and explain it in very simple terms that people can understand. And when when someone said that to me, that was the first moment when I thought, well, maybe that is a unique skill that I should mature a bit more. And I took the thing that I really liked about my job, which was presenting to people, and started to think, well, how can I get in front of more people? How can I start to not just do the customer meetings, but do the conferences and do the presentations? And it was that realization that really set me on this road to thinking, what can I do to make myself kind of unique in businesses? And the only ironic thing I think that came out of it is no matter what job title I've got, I always end up doing the same job. I always end up being the spokesperson, presenter. It doesn't really matter whether I'm Chief Strategy Officer, Chief Innovation Officer, Head of Solution Consulting. It makes no difference. I always end up doing the same job in every company.
I love it. And when did, I want to hear the story. When did you guys become friends, co-workers? What's the story here?
So it was
I'll just kick off just that, it's been just over 3 years because Dave's my boss, and we have become co-workers, colleagues, friends, and now co-authors, which is super cool. And I started to cut you off, Dave. I just wanted to that hit me wow, that's a lot, 3 years.
A lot of titles. A lot of relationship titles here.
It's it's interesting for me. So I first got introduced to Brian 3 years ago by my boss, who said, hey, have you met this guy from Salesforce? And I said, well, I actually had one of his books, but I hadn't associated Brian as working at Salesforce at that point. So I said, no, I've not met him. Let's have a conversation. And I find it very difficult to meet people like me, people that I just gel with, that it's very easy to get on with. And Brian was one of those guys. And although Brian says, yeah, in this relationship, formally, I'm kind of his boss, when it comes to publishing a book, when it comes to understanding, because Brian's written 10, I've written none until this point, then it kind of reversed. For me, it was very much like Brian became my boss then, because I was like, what do I need to do? What do you need from me? Yeah. So, and I think when you do that, even if you do that outside of work, that fundamentally changes your relationship anyway.
Brian, what makes Dave a great leader?
He is one of we have this motto here at ServiceNow: be hungry but humble, and he embodies those things. The list of accomplishments Dave has been very humble in sharing is incredible. The accolades, the when he speaks, it's in front of thousands of people. The way he thinks, he can take complex subjects and really make them understandable. And so what makes him a great leader is that he gives you all of those things in the most approachable way. And he can bring complex subjects and people together to do really great things. And he's also incredibly empowering. So that I just think back to all the things we've done over the last few years, and the list is pretty incredible.
So, Dave, is Brian up for a raise? Was this helpful? I
mean, and he's a manager as well. He manages people, and he knows that it was like a few weeks ago when we did the alterations. So that was like a complete waste of time on his part. But I do appreciate it.
So this is a public review. A publicly facing performance review session. I fooled you, Brian. That's what we're doing actually here. But I want to get to both you guys have spent years helping companies, navigate disruption. What did you see happening when you both said, in this AI space, we need to write this book now and we need to do it together?
Well, let me kick it off, and Brian can see where he goes with it. So the big aha moment for me was when I go out and I'd see all these customers, and I see hundreds of customers a year. And everyone would tell me, hey, we're going to become an AI company, and we're going to be like the AI bank and the AI telco. And then when I looked at what they were doing, everyone was just doing exactly the same thing. So everyone was taking AI and they were just using it to build faster versions of something that they already had. Or, well, perhaps more importantly, faster versions of something that was already obsolete. So they were taking the best tech in the world, like AI was going to change everything, and then they were putting it on old workflows and yesterday's org structures and trying to solve yesterday's questions. And that's when me and Brian were having this conversation where it was like, well, if people really want to get value out of AI, if people really want to do something with it, they need to be thinking about using AI to do the things that they couldn't do before, not just improve the things that they could do before. And out of that conversation, Brian was like, wow, we've had a lot of these conversations that have gone on for multiple hours around this. We probably should like collate all those thoughts and start to put them together. And that was the genesis of the book concept.
It's so interesting you say that too. And I'm using my industry expertise as far as HR and recruiting with all these companies building products in this space too. And my first question with any company when I come in from a consultant point of view is like, do you need the quote unquote AI tech, or is this a process problem that could be solved in the analog old school way with just standard process improvement? And I think that's a big question here, where everyone thinks they need to go out and buy this Ferrari. They need to spend all this money on it, but then they go to buy the Ferrari. No one knows how to drive stick shift. It sits in the driveway, right? It's just sitting there as well, and it's collecting dust when you have all this legacy tech that actually works, but it just needs a little bit of cleaning up and fine-tuning. What are your thoughts there, Brian?
To build on Dave's last point, and then I'll jam in there. I can't remember if it was a text or an email, but I remember the moment that all of those conversations and all of that collation became a book idea. I was thinking about that this weekend, and it was very, very cool since it just launched. So this is all really fresh. But to your point, one of the things that Dave and I had realized early on was that there were just 99.99% of the time, executives are using artificial intelligence with yesterday's playbook. So that is, regardless of the system, regardless of the mindset, regardless of the measures and performance metrics, we are just going to do yesterday more efficiently tomorrow. That has been the primary driver. And in fact, that's probably summarized like every headline you've probably seen over the last 3 years. That, and we now have a faster LLM. And the dangerous part about that is it doesn't just affect company performance. We call those finite companies. It also affects the narrative of how AI is perceived in society. So this is why you see students booing commencement speakers, and this is why you see
Boo AI.
You see headlines, people pushing back, and it is because that playbook isn't just going to limit the company. It's very dangerous. We have to think differently with it. And so that was also part of the inspiration for the book, was how do we help people with AI do what they couldn't do yesterday to become more valuable in their work into society?
So building on that, the central idea of the book is that AI isn't a technology problem, it's a leadership problem. Dave, where are most leaders still getting this wrong? And is it because they haven't learned yet? They haven't dug in enough themselves? Have they not pushed their own limits? Are they over relying on the AI to tell them what to do?
So I think it's because like the fundamental problem for leadership is, and we say this all the time, that your AI strategy shouldn't be about AI. You should be thinking about what do I want to achieve with my company? And when you understand what you want to achieve, how can you use AI to back into that, to give you the resources, the time, the finance to be able to do something? And if you can go to your company with that vision and say, hey, in the next 5 years, we want to become X. And in order to become X, these are the things that need to change. And in order for us to change them, this is where we're going to deploy AI. Then people feel a lot more secure. They understand why people are doing this. They understand what the vision is. But just going in and saying, hey, if we take all the existing workflows we've got and automate them, we'll save money. It makes no sense. This is why people struggle with the ROI model, because you can save bottom line cost by removing people from an organization, but that's not what AI should be about. AI should be about how do you drive that top line revenue? How do you do the things that you couldn't do before? And to kind of pick up a little bit on your last question about, could we take old tech and make it work? The interesting thing about every workflow that sits in an organization today, is you think about your world being in the world of human resources recruiting. You're dealing with the scarcest resource in the world. Every company's scarcest resource is people.
Talent,
so what you did is you designed all your workflows around how do I optimize these scarce resources? How do I make sure the handoffs work successfully? How do I make sure I've got chain of control, that people have approved things? Now we're going into a world of abundance where you can have as much AI as you want. So the chances that the same workflows that you use to optimize the constrained workforce work when you have an infinite workforce, I mean, that's 1,000,000,000 to 1 that they're going to work. So this is the opportunity for leaders as well to take that step back and say, well, this is the time to review something before we act on it. If we just automate what we've just got really fast crap workflows, and no one gets anything out of that.
And I say it all the time: use it as a tool, not a crutch.
Right.
And that's how I bubble that up, and then we extrapolate, as you so eloquently stated there. I love that. I'm going to clip that one up. That is fantastic. So, Brian, when we're looking at companies, what are those warning signs that a company is still operating with this finite mindset, even if they're willing to invest all this money into AI? How do you define what a finite organization looks like? A finite mindset.
It's something that it's not like Dave and I sit in meetings with executives and say, "Oh, well, that's a finite mindset," and then you kind of get up and leave the room. It's psychological. What Dave and I always say is people don't know what they don't know, and so the art of this is to unpack what it is that they're trying to do. So, for example, we will look at workflows, but we'll also look at outcomes, and we'll ask some really meaningful questions. We came out with a paper a couple of years ago that talked about these 2 types of mindsets to bring to every opportunity, which is, do we want to make this better, or do we want to explore value creation? So we I think at the time we called it a digital versus an AI mindset. And one was how, like, how do we make this faster? How do we make this cheaper? And then the other one was, well, what if we reimagine that towards this outcome, or why do we do it that way? And so those types of conversations help leaders think bigger without them feeling like they're accused of thinking too small. We want to make this, we want to make this productive, we want to make this fun, we want to make it imaginative. And so if you look at the recent headlines where the CEOs of Coca-Cola and Walmart said as they were stepping down that they could start the AI journey, but they couldn't finish it, that this is an opportunity for new types of leaders. When Dave was talking about vision, like that AI is a strategy, essentially, it can look like you have a vision because you're doing all of these things with AI, but as we often say, but is it truly a visionary vision? Like, are we trying to do something bigger, better, more different, where people can come along for this ride and feel like they're making a difference? Those are the conversations we try to steer executives toward.
Exactly. And Dave, right? Like, is the risk today moving too slowly with AI, or moving too fast without a strategy? Like, moving too slowly with or without? Like, where's that balance? Or we're still trying to all F around and find out?
I think it's people moving too fast in the wrong direction. So most people, we'll speak to a lot of customers and we'll say, so have you deployed AI? And they're like, yeah, we've got this many agents and we're deflecting this many calls and we're doing all these auto summarizations. And you're like, yeah. And have you got like a control plane in place? Have you got like a control tower to manage it all? No, not really. You're like, okay, so you're out there doing stuff. You're not managing stuff. I had a government the government was in Washington, but it wasn't the American government. It was another country's. And I said to them, what's your vision for AI? And they said, we're gonna automate 90% of all our citizen requests. And I said, fantastic. Why are you going to do that? And there was 50 people in the room.
We have to.
And everyone just looked at each other and went, yeah, why are we going to do that? And you had to actually dig in to get them to understand. There was the government. They weren't going to get rid of people. It was what they were going to do from a futures perspective. So they wouldn't need to hire as many people moving forward, but they could actually improve citizen satisfaction. So we ended up with their vision being that in 5 years' time, they wanted to be sitting in their country and have American politicians visiting them to understand how you should actually manage a citizen ecosystem, which was a much better vision than we want to automate 95% of our citizen code.
I mean, isn't it standard, like thinking about the outcome you want to achieve and reverse engineering back into it? And then how do you keep an open mindset where, I mean, my favorite thing about using any AI for me, and when I explain it at the highest levels, it looks out for my blind spots. It unearths ideas, concepts, thoughts that maybe I have not thought of. It helps triangulate different concepts and put them into cohesive frameworks where I could understand and then figure out how to execute on. So when we talk about execution and we talk about the playbook, right? Like I feel many executives are treating AI like we did with cloud or mobile or digital. But we can't think like that from a playbook perspective. How, like, it sounds so cliche. How are we rewriting the playbook of playbooks? The playbook, like the approach to playbooks. If that makes sense.
That was the book. To be honest.
There we go. I just summarized the book. No one needs to go out and buy it or read it. There it is. The book is going to tell you how to rewrite the book about figure out how to write the playbook about playbooks. There you go.
It is really, coming back to that mindset and the psychology of all of this. Dave talked about his government example. That's just one of 1,000 conversations that we've had like that. I remember when Dave, when you came back from a meeting, you had said that their big goal with AI was 75% deflection or whatever the percentage was, and you asked why did you want to deflect that many? Were you overwhelmed as it is? And they said, well, no. And it was just using AI because of AI. And so the challenge that Dave and I had while we were writing this book was we didn't want to just put together a manuscript that said these are all the problems, these are all the things that companies are doing wrong. What we wanted to do was, to your point, Adam, what are we trying to do? And reverse engineer it. So the entire book became the playbook. We had to think through the questions that no one was answering in order to, how do you reimagine work? How do you change your mindset? How do you measure towards growth? And we looked at AI native companies to give us a lot of those insights so we didn't have to reinvent the wheel. These are companies that are reinventing business and organizational models as they go.
And I think to add to that, we didn't,
Please.
When we started doing the book, we were thinking, well, initially we want to tell people what they can do with AI and how they should implement AI. And then as we started doing research and as we started having conversations, we realized, well, no, it's not just that. We need to think about the organizational structure. We need to think about what that looks like. We need to think about the management structure and the risk profile and what that looks like. We need to think about the business outcomes that the company is trying to drive. So what started off in this very tight ball around AI, suddenly we realized, no, you need to reimagine everything. If you want to have a company that's got this capability to infinitely reinvent and infinitely scale, it's not just a piece of technology, it's a whole shift in how you think about running that company.
Okay, so let's double down on that, Dave. And I want to talk about the human capital here, right? Like, and we live in this world where AI could generate content, code, analyzing data, workflows, all the things we're talking about. What becomes the most valuable piece about the human employee, and how does that evolve? How does the modern workforce, the modern employee change to be relevant, to be effective, and add value within an organization, not become obsolete? And how did the orgs change the other way, how they hire? It's a lot going on here to unpack.
So I mean, this is one of the challenges that the whole thing about AI should really be about people. If you're going to create a technology, that technology should have an element of goodness to it. And I think that it's down to management and leadership to be able to allow us to use that technology to actually become more human. So leaders could focus on allowing people to do stuff that makes us more human. So the focus on creativity, the focus on empathy, being able to mine that curiosity, being able to understand and allow people to exercise judgment, being able to use them to develop vision skills. This is about thinking about the future of society. It's not just about how do we remove jobs. You think about, so there's a story I used to tell when we were talking about, this was the old days of digital transformation. But if you go back to AC and AC in America, 92% of the population was involved in farming. They were all geared around farming. Now, if you look at that percentage, it's around 2%. but it doesn't mean the other 90% became unemployed. Society evolves and society starts to understand roles that are needed and gaps that can be filled around this. If you look at there's a story that we always tell about IKEA, and they weren't using our technology to do it, but it's just a great story. IKEA decided, they looked at all the calls that they were getting coming into the customer service system, and a lot of them were design questions. How do I do this? Is this going to fit in my room? Is this going to go? So they said it'd be really cool if we had like a human-based design service where people could have these conversations. So what they did was said, well, how are we going to get the resources to do this? And what they decided to do was automate their customer service system. So the automated customer service ended up having around 8,000 heads they could use for this interior design process. So some people left, some took early retirement, but they backfill those spaces. And the people who wanted to stay, they trained in the products, they trained in some of the skills around interior design. Now that process, if you said our AI strategy is to automate that call center, that worked really well for them. They saved like $13 million. But when they developed that new interior design concept, as a business unit, that generated over $1 billion in revenue for them. So it increased IKEA's revenue by 4%. And that's someone actually thinking, how do I use AI for humanity? How do I make sure my company is moving people on and allowing them to function in this world rather than just looking at a bottom line cost reduction? So I do think it's down to leadership to allow AI to help humans to function in a more human way.
Who's ready for a cold, hard fact? Indeed's pricing model and all programmatic job advertising is based on driving volume, not outcomes. Job boards get paid on clicks and applies, not hires. Their incentive is to send you more volume. That's what happens with volume-based pricing models. And all that volume creates exactly what you'd expect: mass inefficiency, mountains of unqualified applications, and wasted spend. Meanwhile, TA teams know their career site is already their best source of quality applicants who get hired. TA teams invest in their career sites and employer brand, but the outdated technology makes it too hard for people to connect and apply. Dalia fixes that. Millions of job seekers use Dalia every month to seamlessly connect to employer sites and apply to jobs using their universal candidate profile. No re-entering information over and over. It's like the ShopPay button, but for jobs. It's secure, it integrates directly into your ATS, and works instantly on any career site. Employers using Dalia could double their conversion of career site visitors into qualified applicants and hires. Double the hires from traffic you already have. That's how you start cutting your dependence on Indeed. Learn more at Dalia.co. That's DALIA.co. Thanks. And you guys have said the future isn't human versus machine, it's human plus machine. And I think that's a prime example of that there, how this human AI collaboration could look in a high performing org like IKEA. Brian, what's your take on this hot take that AI is going to replace jobs? What's your spin on this?
Dave and I have talked deeply about this for years, and it was a big driver for the book. I think we confuse jobs with tasks. And I think once we shift that mindset, what we can now do is think, again, Adam, to your point, outcome. And is that the right outcome? Can we think bigger about outcomes? And then reverse engineer that, break down our job into tasks, understand where the human adds the greatest value in that equation. And then that's when you can figure out this human to agent ratio. If those agents don't exist, then that we get those agents in there, human above the loop. And now you're essentially creating what Dave and I talk about in the book. We're shifting from an org chart to a work chart. And now what we're able to do is we're able to increase capacity exponentially versus cut back and limit our competitiveness. We now create a new type of performance vehicle for an organization to grow linearly and exponentially.
So if we're redesigning these companies around intelligence instead of efficiency, Dave, how does leadership need to evolve around this?
Well, this is, and again, it's not for us, it's not one or the other. It's
and versus or.
It's and, yeah. So you need we refer to it as mode 1 and mode 2. Your mode 1 AI is looking at being able to free up the resources to drive mode 2 to allow you to be able to generate those more innovative ideas when it comes out. But the whole concept around how leadership needs to change is, I think right now, I don't think leadership are using AI to augment themselves in the right way. And what I mean by that is, I do believe leadership and even C-level execs, we use AI to do things like, hey, summarize this document. Hey, do this research for me. Hey, send out these emails to this group. But it's all real dross work to do. It's just not something that adds any value. If I was speaking to a C-level exec, one of the questions I'd always be asking them is, have you created almost like a digital twin of you? Not something that understands everything about you, but something where you've trained it on how you think, something where you've pushed it towards the things that you consume and the data that you consume. Because I think the true way to use AI is as a companion, to be able to have that discussion, to be able to say, hey, imagine being a CEO and saying, hey, if you go to your board, or if you go to all your other C-suite and say, I think we should buy this company, what does everyone think? Everyone will just give you an opinion. But imagine having a twin that understood the way you thought, that understood your company, that understood what was going on around the rest of the technology. And you said, hey, do you think this would be a good acquisition? To actually have that conversation with AI that understood your business and understood what was happening would be much more valuable than just using AI to build me a presentation or write me an email. But I don't think enough people are using it that way. For me, people are using it as a tool rather than as an augmentation to themselves.
No, that is fantastic right there. And for leaders that are listening today to this show here, what is that first practical step to really becoming an AI forward org, but removing the chaos and the fear and the resistance?
I can start if you want, Brian, or do you want to start?
Can I just tell a quick story, and then
Rock,
Dave, please.
Paper, scissors. Yeah.
Dave, take it away. But I was over the weekend, had a million things to do, and something completely tripped me up and sent me on this whole path towards like what you're asking, Adam, which is, I don't know if you saw the story about Ford, where they had to rehire 350 engineers that they let go because they had replaced them with AI, only to find out that AI was doing not a good job, let's just say.
And more expensive.
And more expensive. And so they had to rehire 350 engineers back to bring up their product quality, because it wasn't just about cutting costs. They were also cutting quality without realizing it. And the story, like IKEA, is one of those like opportunities where you can open the minds of people to think differently. So to your question, and Dave, I'll pass the torch over to you. That's exactly where to start. And this is where leaders make the mistake. They lean on what they know, which is yesterday's playbook. I spoke with about 75 CEOs at an offsite recently, and most of them throughout the day, it was almost like therapy. They said, I'm supposed to know what to do. And if you have an ego, like most do, then you're going to pretend like you know what to do. And that's where we get into trouble. Dave.
Yeah, I think it's having that upfront conversation is what needs to happen too, so that people understand what you're trying to achieve with artificial intelligence. Because otherwise, I think you develop a sense of fear in the organization. This is where you get these conversations. AI is coming after my job. I had to pick up on Brian's sentiment before about jobs versus tasks. I had I'll tell you a story because it was a funny story.
Please go for it.
I was doing a presentation in Australia, and there was about maybe about 3,000 people in the audience, and I was bringing on a guest customer to present with me, and it was a guy called Tim Hogarth, and Tim's the CTO of ANZ Bank down in Australia, and he'd hurt his leg the day before, or he'd had surgery the day before, so he didn't get to do a rehearsal. So he walks on stage. We're standing looking at the audience, and I said my standard opening question. I said, Tim, what's your AI strategy? And he looked at me and he said, "We don't want to let the dogs win." And I'm standing looking out at the audience thinking, I've got nothing. I don't know where to go with this.
How do I even take that?
So I said, "What do you mean you don't want the dogs to win?" And he said, "We're deploying all this artificial intelligence and it's doing a little bit of everyone's job and everyone's getting back 20 minutes a day. And all that they're doing is they're taking the dogs on a longer walk. So for the millions of dollars, the people who benefit from this are the dogs who get to walk more. What I want to do is look at how I concatenate all that time and then start to understand how I can use that time somewhere else." And that's a much better explanation to say, this is what we want to achieve with AI. We want to concatenate your time. It doesn't mean you're going to do less work. It means you're going to do a different type of work. You're still going to work the same number of hours in a day, but we'll be able to move some of that work somewhere else to be able to build up enough resources to allow us to do a separate project.
It's efficiencies.
Having that honesty, having that openness up front removes a lot of the fear that I think people face if they just do it surreptitiously.
I absolutely love that. So let's crystal ball time here. Fast forward 10 years. The companies that are dominating the industries in 2036, what are they doing that today that everyone else is missing?
I'll kick things off, but we did go through an exercise like this in the book. You know, one of the things that we, not from a time horizon perspective, but just from we call it the infinite canvas. So it's this worksheet that you go through to kind of put some meat on this bone, so you're not having to try to imagineer your way into something that you just don't even know to know. So what we believe is, like, you just get to the core. When companies are making mistakes like the Ford example and they're cutting people, you're going to, several years from now, create this finite model where you lose your competitiveness, while companies like AI natives are scaling from ground zero. They're Control-Alt-Deleting. So somewhere in the middle of this, you don't want to F around and find out like the way Ford did, because if you do that enough, you're going to find that you're on the route of, you name it, Blockbuster, Circuit City, Sears. So what we believe is, if you shift into this mindset of thinking more like a small business, how do I compete against a smaller organization that with AI can outcompete me? What is holding me back? What is the legacy I'm protecting to compete against those types of models? Because what it allows you to do is strip down to the things that are actually holding you back. And so we introduce this concept of a new role called the Chief Workflow Officer, which is exploring, is that the right work? Why do we do it this way? And essentially, when you start attacking it one workflow at a time, you're redesigning your business one workflow at a time.
Dave, do you want to build on that?
So yeah, I use a lot of car analogies for things like this. I'm a big car fan, but if I look at things like, and this might be contentious, but maybe not. If I look at things like the British car industry and the American car industry, when we got to like the 70s, 80s, 90s, there was this focus on automation. How do we compete with foreign car markets to be able to make cars as cheap as possible? And we automated and we put robotized lines in, and we worked out a way of making cars as efficiently as possible. And then we started to sacrifice innovation. So we started to say, well, if we make cars a simpler shape, it'd be easier to mass produce them. And over a period of time, we almost automated away to the point where everything just become generic, everything just become the same. Mm-hmm. And now we're seeing this revitalization of car companies coming in from outside, where they are using AI to build things from the ground up, because they were never constrained by that historical way of doing things. And I think that's when you go forward and you look at the companies that are being successful in 5-10 years time, they're going to be the companies that have workflows that are designed for intelligence. They're going to be the companies that are investing as much in innovation as they are in keeping the lights on. I guess this is the antithesis of that mentality that people used to have in IT, that 80% of the budget was to keep the lights on and 20% was to do interesting stuff. You should be able to reduce that 80% keeping the lights on by using technology like this, but then take what you're saving and move it into that bit where you're
reinvest it.
Right.
Reinvest that time into exponential output and results and ROI. So fun little bonus question here. And whoever wants to take this one, if you could force every CEO to answer one uncomfortable question about their AI strategy right now, what's the question?
Dave, I'm going to jump in because Dave and I ask this question all the time, which is, if you're going to save time and money with AI, what are you going to do with it?
So now that you saved it, now what are you going to do with it?
Yeah, because if your goal is to just cut
headcount, then
some people will say we are just going to cut the revenue. We just want to save bottom line costs, and this is a competitive, cutthroat landscape, and
to be fair,
and we need to reduce bottom line costs. And if that's what they want to do, that's fine. You can use the technology to do it, but I guess I'll be having a different conversation with them in 5 years' time.
So I as Brian's the veteran author here, but Dave, what did you learn about yourself in the process of writing this book personally? What did you go through? What did you learn about yourself?
So this was the most education I've probably had in the last 10 years. You always talk about doing new things. This was completely new to me, and it was the thing that stood out the most to me as part of the writing process was just having an idea isn't good enough. The idea's got to be justified in some way. So I remember the first time, I can't remember what it was I said, but I remember the first time I said something to Brian, and I said, well, I think this is going to happen. And he said, why? And I was like, oh, don't do this. This is what we do to customers all the time.
Don't do the 5 whys. We don't need the 5 whys till an answer. Right?
But then I had to go through and research and say, well, is it going to happen? And the number of times I'd have an idea and go through and find research that negated that idea, that explained why it wasn't going to happen, was just as eye-opening. So for me, understanding that you had to have research that backed up your thoughts or your ideas, and being able to put those ideas into a language and a framework that would allow people to be able to use it easily, rather than just being something that people want to read. These were things that were completely new for me. And then understanding the whole publishing process, I still don't understand the publishing process.
and Brian, as this is not your first rodeo here, and you're learning each evolution, each new book that you're putting, what was different about this process with Dave?
It was fun, actually. I learned a lot. When you write a book by yourself, you're in your own cave, you're in your own head, and this is a process that takes over a year, even as fast as things are moving. And so it was a fun learning exercise for me. The best part of the book was actually putting it together. We had this really fun collaborative process that we fine-tuned over the year. And the other thing was, just quickly, was the challenge of trying to write something that wouldn't be obsolete about a technology that's moving faster and faster every day. And that helped shape a better book.
How much AI did you use in the process and organization of writing the book? Not so much the content, but in the process of it.
Yeah, I liked your word earlier, like you collaborated with it. That's exactly what we did to get us thinking differently. What are we missing? But I will tell you too that there are a lot of mistakes that it makes, and so you can't over rely.
Don't take it as gospel. Yeah. Do not. That's what everyone's doing. I see it in the talent space when I see every freaking resume looking the same as a job description. That's not going to get you through the door. You need it to stand out. Dave, what's keeping you up at night about the AI tech? What's scaring you?
I guess I'm scared of people's ignorance of what's going to happen with it. So most people don't really understand what the capabilities of AI is, but people make assumptions around what's happened. And I think it's been interesting recently, just that one statement that I think it was Satcher that made it, who said that AI is going to replace all SaaS models, and it's going to become where all the logic lives and sits. And just watching the ripple effect that one sentence had like that, taking trillions of valuation across companies globally, was really surprising to me. And I do wonder, or what keeps me up at night is the fear that someone makes a mistake like that or says something like that has such a profound effect on the economy that it takes decades to recover from it.
It is scary there. Well, Brian, let's end on some flowers here, some optimism, some sunshine. We don't want to end on a sour, dark note here. What are you most optimistic about this technology? What lights you up?
Oh man, what lights me up is what the recurring theme of this conversation, which is augmentation. So if I love, like, some of my biggest heroes are like Walt Disney or Steve Jobs, and it was always about imagining something bigger, different, better, taking yesterday and just making tomorrow a better place to be. And so those constructs, those mental models that you bring into how you work with the technology like AI and how you think about extending your capacity with agents, to me, this is a hero story. Like, we're all going to be better with it. What I also want to end on in terms of flowery notes is that we also need leaders who can bring that out of us. We need leaders who are going to think with an abundant mindset, who are going to think with an empowerment mindset, because we don't know what we don't know. And when students are booing commencement speeches, it is an abject failure of leadership at every level.
Imagine that. Dave, what's lighting you up? Bring us home here.
I think the possibilities of being able to do things that we just couldn't do before. I can already do things that I never had the capabilities to do before. I can function at a higher level than I did before. I think what's really gonna bring everything together is when you've got this concept of being able to augment yourself and improve yourself, to be able to learn new skills. I've got a lot of hope for my kids that as they're going through college now, they might get the chance to do multiple jobs during their lifetime as opposed to just going into one career, because AI will give you that capability to self-educate, to reinvent, to augment. So I think there's a greater possibility of people having a much more varied and interesting life.
Absolutely love it. Well, gentlemen, this has been a fantastic conversation. We could probably talk for hours and go down rabbit holes. We're going to wrap this one up here. This has been fantastic. I want everyone to check out the Infinite Blueprint book. We're going to link it up in the comments for everybody there. You could also follow these guys on LinkedIn. We'll link them up as well. Where else could folks find you? Where could they connect? Where could they learn more?
Brian's much better at this than I am.
Give us a plug.
In infinitecompany.ai is the place to go to find your new playbook for playbooks.
The new playbook for playbooks. And if this show meant something to you, everyone listening, leave a review rating. It goes a long way. Thank you for joining us on the podcast. Please follow us on the social media channels. You know what they are. Trying to bump up that YouTube. YouTube's a tough nut to crack. You got to get involved with that. Subscribe, comment, and network. Remember, be good to yourself. Be better to others. Thanks for joining us, and catch us next week for another great episode of the podcast. Take care, everybody.
Wisdom is forever, but for us, it's time to go. Thank you for joining us. Luckily, we'll be back with our next episode soon, jam-packed with more incredible humans. Thank you for listening, subscribing, and sharing. To join the conversation, search the podcast on LinkedIn. And to catch up on past episodes and more info, please visit www.thepodcast.com.